The battle was over, but the echoes of gunfire still rang in Jace's ears. His body felt heavy, his chest ached, and every breath burned like fire. He did not know how long he had been lying there on the cold metal floor. Only that the world around him smelled of smoke and blood. When his eyes finally opened, the sight above him was not a human face, but something strange, something alive and watching. A small figure stood beside him, barely reaching his shoulder even while he lay flat. Her body was covered in short, soft fur, golden brown like sunlight on sand. Her large cat-like eyes reflected the pale green glow of the room, and her pointed ears twitched at every sound. She wore a tight medical suit with strange glowing patches, and on her back was a pouch full of alien tools. She was not human, but she was not attacking him either. "Relax," she said, her voice soft yet firm, her accent heavy, as if speaking human language was new to her. Her tail flicked behind her, and her small clawed hands reached for him without fear. "I fix you," she added, as though it was an order, not a choice. Before Jace could ask who she was or what she meant, she climbed onto the bed beside him. Her movements were quick and light, like a predator stalking prey, yet her eyes held no threat, only focus. Her knees pressed into the mattress as she straddled him. Jace's heart pounded. She was so close he could feel the warmth of her body. One hand held his shoulder down, the other pressed directly into his wound. He hissed in pain, but she ignored it, muttering words in her own language. A faint green light began to flow from her fingertips into his torn flesh. It burned like acid and ice at the same time, making his whole body tense. "What are you?" he began, but her tail wrapped around his wrist, holding him still. She looked straight into his eyes, and for the first time, Jace saw something there. Not hostility, not pity, but duty. "I am nurse," she said simply, as if that explained everything. Then she returned to her work, leaning forward so her hair brushed against his cheek. Every movement of her hands sent waves of pain through him. But beneath that pain, he could feel something changing. The deep tear in his side was knitting itself together, the bleeding slowing. His vision blurred, not from blood loss now, but from confusion. He had been told beastfolk were wild, dangerous, loyal only to their clans. But here was one, tiny, delicate compared to other aliens he had seen, pouring her own strength into healing a human soldier when he tried to speak again. She shook her head, her ears twitching. "Talk later. Live first," she whispered. The glow from her hands faded, and she swayed slightly as if the effort had drained her. Jace noticed her breathing was faster, her fur damp with sweat. It was then he realized the healing process was costing her something too. "You're helping me," he said quietly. "Why?" She didn't meet his eyes this time, just pulled a small cloth from her pouch and wiped the blood from his chest. "Oath," she murmured. "Heal all. Even enemy." Her words struck him like a bullet in war. Kindness was rare, and from the enemy's side, almost impossible. She slid off him lightly, her bare feet making no sound on the cold floor. For a moment, he thought she might leave, but instead, she began tidying the tools she had used. Checking the monitors beside his bed, her hands trembled slightly, and her tail swayed slowly. Tired but still alert, Jace wanted to ask her name, but before he could, her head snapped toward the door. Her ears flattened, her eyes narrowed, and she moved quickly back to his side without warning. She pulled the blanket over them both and pressed her small body against his chest. She whispered, her breath warm on his skin. Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside, metallic, inhuman, marching in sync through the gap in the blanket. Jace could see the door begin to slide open. A shadow fell across the room, tall and wide. Blocking the faint light from the corridor, the figure paused, scanning the room with slow, deliberate movements. Jace held his breath, feeling the nurse's heartbeat against his ribs. The alien at the door muttered something low and sharp in their language before finally stepping back. The door closed with a soft hiss, and the footsteps faded away. Only then did the Beastwoman nurse lift her head, her ears twitching again as if checking for danger. Her eyes met his, and for a moment there was something unspoken between them. "You safe?" "For now," she said quietly. Oh, jeez. Realized she was not just his healer. She had just risked her life to protect him. And he knew without asking that whatever happened next, their fates were now tied together. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of alien machines. Jace could still feel the warmth where the tiny Beastwoman nurse had pressed against him, hiding them both from the soldier who had passed. Her small frame had shielded him like a living wall. Despite her size, she moved away from him now. Her steps light but a little shaky, her ears turned toward the door for a few seconds before she looked back at him. "You hurt more," she said simply, as if reading his mind. Jace wanted to argue, to tell her he could manage without more strange treatment, but she was already climbing onto the bed again. The movement was quick, like a cat leaping into a warm spot. Her knees landed on either side of his hips, her tail curling upward as she opened the pouch on her back. Inside were strange tools, small glass tubes glowing faintly, folded metallic strips, and tiny crystals that pulsed with light. She chose one of the glowing tubes, biting the top off with sharp little teeth, and green mist drifted from it. "Hold still," she told him, her golden eyes serious. He almost laughed. How could he move with her sitting on him like this? Before he could say anything, she pressed the open tube against his wound. The green mist sank into his skin like liquid fire. The pain was instant and deep, shooting through every nerve in his body. Jace clenched his jaw to stop himself from shouting. His hands gripped the blanket, but her tail moved over one of them, gently pressing it down as if to comfort him. "This fix." "Fast," she said, voice low. She leaned closer, her fur brushing his cheek as she reached for a small metallic strip. The strip unfolded into a flexible patch that she placed directly over his injury. It stuck without glue, melting slightly into his skin as if becoming part of him. Jace's vision swam from the strange sensation. The smell of her fur mixed with the bitter scent of alien medicine, making his head spin. "Doesn't this hurt you too?" he asked between sharp breaths. She didn't answer right away, her focus locked on his wound. Finally, she nodded once, a short, almost reluctant movement. "Little, but I strong," she said. He noticed the tips of her ears drooping slightly, a sign she was tiring. The green glow from her hands flickered as she worked. She was burning her own energy to heal him, just as she had before, when she reached for another glowing crystal. Jace caught her wrist gently. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me," he said. Her eyes met his, and for a moment she looked younger. "Softer, I know," she said quietly, "but oath, he'll all. No matter enemy, no matter friend." Her voice was steady, but her tail wrapped tightly around her own leg, betraying her tension. Jace let go of her wrist, and she resumed the treatment. He realized then that her care was not just duty, it was defiance. Healing him might be breaking her own people's laws. She applied the crystal, and a cool rush of relief followed. Replacing the burning pain, his breathing steadied, though his body still felt heavy. She leaned back slightly, resting her hands on her thighs. Her gaze scanned him like she was checking. "If he would survive the night, you live," she said finally, almost like a command. Then she slid down off the bed, landing silently on the floor. Her tail swayed behind her as she packed her tools. But before she could finish, a distant, metallic clang echoed through the hallways. Her ears shot upright, and she froze. "That sound?" Jace asked, though he already knew it was trouble. She turned toward the door, her claws lightly scraping the floor. "Guards," she whispered, searching. For me, he understood immediately. She wasn't just risking punishment for helping him. If they found her, they would kill her without hesitation. She moved back to his side, surprisingly fast for someone so small. You move? She asked, eyes sharp. Barely, he admitted, but I can stand. She nodded once, then climbed onto the bed again, this time not to treat him, but to help him sit up, her small hands hooked under his arm, and she pressed her shoulder into his ribs, bracing her whole weight against him. Jace felt the strength hidden in her tiny frame. For someone so small, she was far stronger than she looked. The sound of the guards grew louder, the heavy rhythm of boots striking the metal floor. She reached for a strange device from her pouch, a flat oval that shimmered with blue light. This hide us, she said. Only for a minute, before he could ask what it was. She pressed it against his chest and climbed onto him again. Her body blocked the device from sight, her head tucked under his chin. She whispered something in her own language, and the air around them shimmered faintly. Outside, the footsteps passed by, slower now, as if the guards were scanning each room. Jace stayed still, every muscle tense. Her tail had wrapped around his waist without him noticing, holding him firmly. He could feel her heart beat against his own, fast but steady, when the footsteps finally faded. She pulled back, ears twitching as if to make sure the danger was gone. Then she looked at him, her eyes sharp but not unkind. We must go soon, she said. And for the first time, Jace realized she wasn't just saving his life. She was pulling him into hers. The room felt smaller now, as if the walls had moved closer. Jace sat up slowly, his muscles stiff but his wound no longer burning. The tiny Beastwoman nurse stood near the door, her ears twitching every few seconds. She was listening to something he could not hear. Her tail was low and still, a sign that she was alert but ready to act. They come, she said in a low voice. Not taking her eyes off the metal door, Jace knew she meant the guards. Why are they after you? He asked. Her golden eyes flicked toward him, sharp but calm. Because? Help wrong person. She answered, the weight of her words settled heavily on him. He was that wrong person. Her kindness had already put her life in danger. A faint hiss came from the hallway, the sound of the door's outer lock being released. Her ears twitched again, and she moved quickly to his side. She grabbed his arm with surprising strength and pushed him down flat onto the bed. Stay still. No talk, she whispered firmly. Then, without hesitation, she climbed onto the bed and pulled the thin blanket over both of them. Her body pressed against his, her head near his shoulder. Her small hands rested lightly on his chest, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath. The door slid open with a slow, mechanical grind. Heavy footsteps entered not one pair, but several, through a tiny gap in the blanket. Jace could see tall shadows moving in the green glow of the room. The guards were massive, armored, their weapons held ready. Their helmets had glowing red eyes that scanned the area. One of them stepped closer to the bed. Jace felt his heart pounding so loudly he feared they would hear it. The nurse's tail tightened slightly around his thigh. A silent command to stay calm. A voice spoke in an alien tongue, cold and sharp. Another voice answered, sounding impatient. The first guard bent closer to the bed, and Jace could feel the heat of their armor through the blanket. The nurse shifted just slightly, her claws pressing gently into his side. It wasn't a threat, it was a reminder to stay silent after. A tense moment, the guard straightened. Muttering something to the others, the footsteps moved away from the bed. The sound of scanning devices filled the room, high-pitched and electric. Jace prayed they wouldn't detect the strange hiding device she had used earlier. Finally, after what felt like hours, the guards left, the door slid shut again, sealing the room in silence. The nurse slowly pulled the blanket back, Her ears still angled toward the hallway. Only when she was sure they were gone did she exhale. Her tail uncurled from around him, and she stepped off the bed in one smooth motion that was close. Jace muttered. She looked at him and nodded once. Too close, he sat up again, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. They were looking for you, weren't they? He asked. Yes. And you, she said, moving to the far corner to check her tools. Jace frowned. Me? She glanced back at him, her eyes narrowing. You are human soldier. They think you know things. They want to take you. Her tone was matter-of-fact. But there was a flicker of worry in her gaze. C's mind raced. He was still too weak to fight, and she was small, fast, but not built for direct combat. If they came back in greater numbers, they wouldn't survive. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, testing his strength. She watched him carefully, her tail swaying slowly. You move, we leave. She said, stay, you die. Her blunt honesty caught him off guard, but it was true. Before they could speak more, a loud crash echoed from somewhere down the corridor. The nurse's ears snapped toward the sound. She moved to the door and tapped a small panel on the wall. A holographic feed appeared, blurry, but enough to show a group of guards dragging another wounded alien. They were speaking quickly, and from the tone, it was clear they had orders to sweep every medical room. Her eyes widened slightly. They come this way, she whispered. Jace stood fully now. Though unsteady, she moved quickly to his side, slipping under his arm to help support his weight. Her touch was firm, guiding him toward a small side door. He hadn't noticed before. It was half hidden behind a tall storage unit. She pressed her palm to a scanner, and the panel opened with a soft click. Inside was a narrow passage, barely wide enough for the two of them. Go, she said, pushing him forward. The passage was dim. Smelling of metal and old air, they moved. Quickly, her small feet making no sound, Jace followed her lead, trying not to lean on her too much. Every few steps, she glanced back at him, her eyes reflecting faint light in the darkness. At one point, she stopped suddenly, her ears twitching. From behind them came the muffled sound of the door to their old room being forced open. They find empty bed, she said softly. Now. They hunt, they kept moving, the narrow passage twisting like a maze. Jace's breathing was rough, but he didn't slow. She led him to a grate at the end of the corridor. She crouched low, clawing at the bolts until they came loose. With a quick pull, she slid the grate aside, revealing a drop into another dim hallway. Down, she ordered, and he obeyed. Landing with a grunt, she followed, landing lightly beside him. Then she took his hand without hesitation. Her grip was warm, steady, and it felt like the first solid thing he had held in hours. Come, she said. We have little time. And together, they disappeared deeper into the alien facility, the sound of their pursuers growing ever closer. The narrow hallway twisted and turned like a hidden snake inside the walls of the facility. Jace followed the tiny Beastwoman nurse closely, his hands still in hers. Her steps were quick but silent, her ears always turning toward any sound ahead or behind. The glow from a small crystal in her pouch lit the path just enough for him to see. His wound no longer bled, but his body still ached with every step. He knew they could not keep running like this forever. After several minutes, she stopped at a small round door. It was old and covered in dust, as if no one had used it in years. She crouched and brushed the dust away, revealing a faded symbol painted on the metal. It looked like a pair of wings wrapped around a star. Jace didn't recognize it, but from the way her eyes narrowed, he knew she did. This is old transport tunnel, she whispered. If we reach the end, we find ship. She placed her small clawed hand against the center of the door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a thin line of light traced a circle, The metal split open with a soft sigh, revealing darkness beyond. Cool air rushed out, smelling faintly of rust and oil. She slipped inside first, her tail brushing the doorway, and motioned for him to follow. The space inside was cramped. With pipes running along both walls, water dripped somewhere in the distance. Echoing in the quiet, Jace looked at her in the dim light. "Why are you helping me escape?" he asked, his voice low. She didn't answer immediately. Her gaze fixed on the shadows ahead. Finally, she said, "Because. If they take you, they will break you. Then use you." Her voice was calm, but carried a sharp edge. "And if they catch me, I die," she added, matter-of-factly. Jace didn't argue. He understood now that their lives were tied together. They moved deeper into the tunnel, the silence broken only by the soft padding of her feet. Once, she stopped suddenly, pressing her back against the wall. She pulled him close beside her, her small body fitting against his side. Through a crack in the tunnel wall, they could see another corridor. 2 guards walked past, their armor reflecting a cold metallic light. The nurse's hands stayed on his chest until the footsteps faded. Then she stepped away, ears still twitching to catch the last echoes. "We cannot go straight," she said. "Too many guards near exit." She looked around, scanning the walls until her eyes found a narrow vent above. Without hesitation, she climbed onto a pipe, her claws gripping the metal. She glanced down at him. "Come," she said simply. Jace grabbed the pipe and pulled himself up. His muscles protesting, she reached down with both hands. Helping him steady himself, her strength surprised him again for someone so small. She could hold more weight than he expected. The vent was barely big enough for one person, but she crawled in first. Her tail disappeared into the darkness, and he followed. The air inside was warm and smelled faintly of her fur mixed with metal. They moved slowly, careful not to make noise. Every few meters, she stopped to listen, her ears brushing the top of the vent. At one point, she whispered, "Almost there," and Jace felt a spark of hope. Finally, they reached a grate that looked out into a storage room. Boxes and crates were stacked high, the walls lined with tools and spare parts. The room was empty, lit only by a single flickering light. She removed the grate silently and dropped down. Landing like a shadow, Jace followed, though his landing was heavier. Making the light sway slightly, she moved quickly to the far wall and started digging through one of the crates. When she turned back, she held a set of armor, not alien soldier armor, but something lighter, more flexible. "Were this?" she said, tossing it to him. Jace caught it and looked at it in surprise. It was clearly alien-made, but shaped for a human frame. As he started putting it on, she stepped closer to adjust the straps. Her small hands moved quickly, tightening pieces and securing fasteners. To reach the chest piece, she climbed up, straddling his waist to fasten the last locks. Their faces were only inches apart, her breath warm against his skin. "If we are caught, it will tear us apart," she whispered, her voice low and certain. When the armor was secured, she dropped back down and moved to a panel on the wall. "This leads to hangar," she said, "but guards always there." She took a deep breath and looked at him. "We must move fast. And you must fight if needed." Jace nodded, knowing there was no other choice. She pressed a sequence of buttons on the panel, and the wall slid open, revealing another dim corridor. The sound of engines hummed faintly in the distance. It was the promise of freedom, but also the risk of being seen. The nurse stepped into the corridor first, tails swaying slowly. Jace followed close behind, every step bringing them closer to danger. And as they moved toward the hangar, the thoughts stayed in his mind. They were no longer just escaping. They were running straight into whatever fate waited for them on the other side. The corridor stretched out in front of them, long and dim, with thin strips of pale light running along the floor. The air smelled faintly of fuel and hot metal, a sign they were getting closer to the hangar. Jace's new armor felt strange on his body, lighter than human gear, but tight in ways that made every movement sharper. The tiny Beastwoman nurse walked ahead of him, her tail swaying slowly, her ears turning left and right to catch every sound. Her steps were quick but silent, and she glanced back often to make sure he could keep up. "Stay close," she whispered, her voice low and urgent. Jace nodded, adjusting his grip on the alien pistol she had given him from the storage room. It was small but heavy, with a smooth grip that hummed faintly in his hand. He had no idea how to reload it, but he doubted they'd get the luxury of a long fight. Every second they spent in the open corridor felt like tempting fate. Halfway down the hall, the nurse suddenly stopped. Her ears flicked forward, her body lowering slightly into a crouch. Jace froze, following her gaze. Far ahead, 2 alien guards were standing at a security post, their weapons slung across their chests. They were talking, but their eyes kept. Sweeping the corridor, the nurse leaned toward him, whispering, "We cannot fight here." Too loud, her golden eyes narrowed as she glanced at the vents above. She pointed to a panel just above their heads. "Up," she said, before leaping onto the wall pipe with feline grace. Her claws gripped the metal, and in seconds she was lifting the panel. Jace followed, slower and heavier, the armor making him feel clumsy in comparison when he reached the vent opening. She grabbed his wrist and helped pull him in. Her small hands were strong, pulling with surprising force for her size. Inside the vent, the air was warm and dry. The sound of the guards below echoed faintly, their voices carrying up through the thin metal. The nurse moved ahead on all fours, her tail brushing against his leg as she passed him. They crawled until they were directly above the security post, through a thin grate. Jace could see the guards standing below, still talking. The nurse paused, listening carefully, then pointed further ahead. They kept moving until the vent ended in another panel. She opened it slowly, peeking out into the corridor beyond the guards. It was clear, at least for now. She slipped out first, landing on her feet without a sound. Jace dropped down after her, his boots making a soft thud against the floor. Without wasting a second, they began moving again, this time faster. The hum of engines grew louder now, vibrating through the walls. Jace could almost imagine the hangar ahead, ships lined up, escape within reach, but then the alarm changed. The steady hum replaced by a sharp, pulsing tone. The nurse's ears flattened, and she looked at him with a grim expression. "They know we move," she said. "We run now." She darted forward, her small body weaving from side to side, making herself harder to target. Jace ran after her, his armor clinking lightly with each step. Behind them, the sound of boots striking metal rang out fast. Heavy and getting closer, the nurse didn't slow down. Taking a sudden, sharp turn into another passage, Jace followed, nearly slipping as his boots skidded on the smooth floor. They burst into a wider hallway, one side lined with large observation windows showing the hangar beyond through the glass. Jace caught a glimpse of their possible escape. A small shuttle docked in the far corner. It looked old but intact, its engines faintly glowing as if ready for flight. Before he could say anything, the nurse grabbed his hand and pulled him toward a side door. "This way," she said, her voice tight. But before they could reach it, a squad of guards appeared from the opposite end of the hallway. Their weapons came up instantly, red targeting lights flashing across the walls. "In here," the nurse hissed, yanking him toward a maintenance hatch. She pressed her palm to the panel, and it opened just enough for them to slip through. They ran through the narrow maintenance corridor, pipes and wires crowding the walls. The sound of footsteps behind them never faded. The guards were following through the same side passages. Jace's heart pounded in his chest. He knew that if They slowed even a little. The chase would be over. Up ahead, the corridor split into two paths. The nurse didn't hesitate. Taking the left turn and leaping over a low barrier, Jace followed, nearly hitting his head on a low pipe. The air grew hotter, filled with the scent of fuel. They were close. Now, the nurse stopped suddenly at a heavy blast door. "It leads to hangar floor," she said quickly, "once open." No going back. She tapped a code into the panel, and the door began to rise. Light from the hangar spilled in, and the sound of engines roared louder. She looked back at him one last time, her eyes fierce. "Stay with me." "No matter what," she said, and then the door opened fully, revealing the chaos of the hangar beyond. Ships, cargo, and dozens of armed aliens stood between them and freedom. The hangar exploded into chaos the moment they stepped through the AC. "Blast door!" Engines roared. Alien voices shouted orders, and the clang of metal boots echoed from every side. The sharp smell of fuel and hot machinery filled the air. Bright lights from the ceiling reflected off the polished metal floors, making the space feel even more exposed. Jace scanned the area quickly. There were at least a dozen guards, maybe more, between them and the small shuttle in the corner. Every one of them was armed, and their red targeting beams danced across the walls. Searching for intruders, the tiny Beastwoman nurse stayed low, her ears flat, her golden eyes locked on. "The shuttle, that is ours," she said firmly, pointing toward it with one clawed hand. Her voice carried no doubt, only determination. Jace nodded, tightening his grip on the alien pistol. They didn't have time to plan if they hesitated. They'd be surrounded. The first guard spotted them, shouting something in their guttural language. Weapons came up, and red lights locked onto their chests. The nurse didn't freeze. She moved first, springing forward with feline speed. Her small body blurred as she leaped onto a stack of cargo crates. Using them as cover, Jace followed, firing the pistol at the nearest guard. The weapon kicked harder than he expected, sending a bolt of green energy into the alien's armor. The target fell, but two more took its place. The air filled with the crackle of energy fire, bolts slamming into walls and crates. Sparks showered around them. And the nurse's tail whipped in sharp, precise movements as she darted from cover to cover. She used the chaos to leap onto a guard's back, her claws digging into his neck joint. The alien roared in pain, stumbling forward before collapsing. Jace moved up beside her, blocking another shot with his forearm armor. The impact rattled his bones, but he stayed on his feet, returning fire with steady aim. More guards poured in from the far side of the hangar. The nurse's ears flicked toward them, and she hissed under her breath. "Too many," she said quickly. "We must move now." She grabbed his wrist, pulling him toward a narrow maintenance path that led closer to the shuttle. They ran, ducking under moving cranes and weaving between stacks of cargo. But the guards kept coming, their heavy boots pounding behind them. A shot rang out, and Jace saw it a split second before it hit. The bolt struck the nurse in the side, sending her spinning to the floor. She cried out, her small body curling in pain. Jace didn't think. He turned and fired at the shooter, hitting them square in the chest. Then he was on his knees beside her. Blood stained her medical suit, dark against the golden brown fur. Her breathing was sharp and shallow, but her eyes stayed on him. "Go. Leave me," she said, her voice tight. "Not happening," Jace growled, sliding one arm under her and lifting her with ease. She was light, too light, and it scared him, but she wrapped her arms around his neck, holding on as he stood. He fired over her shoulder as he moved, each shot forcing the guards to dive for cover. The path ahead cleared just enough for them to reach the shuttle's ramp, but as they neared it, another squad appeared, blocking the way. Their weapons came up in perfect unison. Jace stopped, his grip tightening on the pistol. The nurse's tail curled around his arm as if to steady him. Her voice was a whisper in his ear. "We fight together." And then she pushed herself up from his arms, leaping forward despite her wound. She landed in the middle of the squad, slashing at weapons and knocking them aside. Her speed was a blur, forcing the aliens to turn their aim away from Jace. He charged in after her, firing and striking with the pistol's heavy grip. 2 guards went down, then 3. The last one swung a blade at him, but Jace caught the arm and twisted, sending the alien crashing to the floor. The nurse stumbled, her legs giving out. Jace caught her again, pulling her close as the hangar alarms blared louder. The shuttle's ramp was open now, the engine hum rising. They were almost there. But more footsteps echoed from behind, without a word. Jace turned and fired one last volley, forcing their pursuers to scatter. Then he sprinted up the ramp, the nurse in his arms, inside. The cockpit was small, but familiar enough. Basic controls, a pilot seat, and enough space too. Breathe. He set her down gently, her head resting against the seat. You fly? He asked quickly. She gave a weak smile. I heal. But I learned to fly. Her small hands moved over the controls, pressing switches with practiced precision. The engines roared. The shuttle lifting from the hangar floor, guards fired from below, but the ship's shields flared. Absorbing the hits, Jace stood by the door, watching as the hangar grew smaller and smaller. Finally, the blast doors sealed behind them, cutting off the sight of their enemies. They were in open space now, stars stretching endlessly ahead. The nurse slumped back in her seat, her breathing slowing. Jace knelt beside her, checking the wound. We made it, he said softly. Her tail curled weakly around his wrist, and she gave a faint nod. For now, she whispered. Closing her eyes, Jace looked out the viewport, knowing the fight wasn't over. But for this moment, they were alive, and that was enough. The shuttle drifted through the black silence of space. Stars glittered outside the viewport like cold fires, far away and unreachable. The hum of the engines was steady now, a low and calming sound after the chaos of the hangar. Jace sat beside the pilot's seat, one hand resting on the tiny Beastwoman nurse's shoulder. She was pale beneath her golden-brown fur, her breathing slow but steady. The wound in her side had stopped bleeding. Thanks to a quick patch from the medkit on board, her eyes opened slightly, the golden glow still there but softer. You still here? She whispered, her voice faint. Of course I'm still here, Jace said, keeping his tone calm. You think I'd leave after what you did for me? Her ears twitched, a small flicker of relief crossing her face. I told you. I help all. Even enemy, she murmured. But you not feel enemy now, she added, her gaze holding his. Jace leaned back, exhaling slowly. He thought about everything that had happened in the last hours, waking in an alien infirmary, her climbing onto him to heal his wounds, hiding under the blanket from guards, running through dim corridors, fighting side by side in the hangar. In the middle of it all, the thought that kept returning was simple. She could have left him behind at any point, but she didn't. What's your name? He asked softly, her ears perked just slightly. Rivka, she said. He nodded. I'm Jace. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Jace, she repeated slowly, as if testing the sound. Silence stretched for a while, broken only by the hum of the engines. Rivka shifted in her seat, wincing slightly. Jace reached into the medkit and took out a small injector. Hold still, he said, pressing it gently to her side. She didn't flinch, just watched him with curious eyes. You learn my work fast, she said quietly. Not as fast as you learn to fly, he replied, and she gave a soft huff. That might have been a laugh. After a few minutes, her breathing eased and she looked toward the viewport. Where we go now? She asked. Jace thought for a moment. I don't know yet, he admitted, but somewhere safe. Her tail swayed slowly at that, curling once around her leg. There is no safe, she said after a pause. Not for me. Not for you now, Jace. Met her gaze, his voice steady. Then we'll make somewhere safe. Her eyes searched his for a long moment. You mean, stay together? She asked. He nodded without hesitation. You saved my life more than once today, Rivka, he said. I'm not letting you face whatever's coming alone. For a moment, she said nothing, her ears tilting slightly as if she was weighing his words. Then, slowly, she reached out one small hand and rested it on his arm. Her claws were retracted, her touch gentle. Then, I am your nurse, she said softly. Always. Jace gave a small smile. And I'm your... What? Patient? Bodyguard. Her tail flicked once in amusement. Both, she said. The quiet between them now felt different, no longer tense, but calm. The fear of the chase was fading, replaced by something else, not quite trust yet. But the start of it, outside the viewport. The stars shifted as the shuttle adjusted course. Jace moved to the pilot's seat, checking the controls. The navigation display showed no set destination, just the endless black ahead. We'll need supplies, he said, half to himself. Rivka nodded slowly. I know places. Old paths. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had lived in shadows for a long time. Jace glanced back at her. You've been running a while, haven't you? She didn't deny it, just gave a small nod. But now? Not alone. She said quietly. That simple truth settled between them like an unspoken promise. She shifted in her seat, curling up slightly, her head resting against the armrest, her tail curled loosely around her own legs. The tip twitching every so often, her eyes drifted shut, the tension in her shoulders finally easing. Jace watched her for a moment, noting how small she seemed compared to the seat. It was strange. Hours ago, he'd seen her as an alien stranger. Now she felt like the only constant in a galaxy that had just tried to kill him. He reached forward, dimming the lights in the cockpit. The hum of the engines grew softer, blending with the faint sound of her breathing, leaning back in the co-pilot's seat. He allowed himself to rest, not fully asleep, but close. His mind kept replaying her words. I am your nurse. Always outside, the stars stretched on endlessly. The shuttle moved quietly through the void, carrying them away from danger but deeper into the unknown. Neither of them knew what lay ahead. New enemies, new battles, maybe worse than what they had just escaped. But for now, it didn't matter. They had survived. They had each other. And in the vast cold of space, that was enough.